Welcome to Elemental Reforged. Without a doubt, one of the most unique strategy games I've played in a very long time. In fact, it would be fair to say it's so unique that when I sat down to play this sort of RPG come strategy game blend, I didn't even know where to begin. So, let's start in the beginning. This is Elemental Reforged in its early access, the earliest of early access builds, in fact. And this is its character customization, or indeed civilization customizer, as it were. Initially, here I'm selecting some traits, strengths and weaknesses, colors, as well as the name of my people. Down the bottom right, you can see I'm also picking an ideology, kingdom versus empire, selecting a race, as well as its crest. This is the first layer of customization. I get to pick the name of my civilization or faction, a shorthand name for it, and I get to customize my skin color to a gloriously hot pink. There are some elements here that are purely strategy, and there are other elements that are purely fun and aesthetics. There's a lot of stuff also I have to level with you that I don't fully understand. This game has a lot of depth to it, and I've barely scratched the surface. Here in the final parts, I'm choosing talents, appearance. This includes things like equipment that will have real-world impacts in the game to my overall statistics, as well as more cosmetic stuff. I'm also choosing between magical abilities and more sort of, shall we say, traditional offense. Finally, a pose and a background, and then some map settings, of which there are many, and we're finally ready to crack into a game of Elemental Reforged. I say finally not because I've been impatient. In fact, initially this was going to be a kind of a let's play style video. But when I went back to edit this footage, I had spent about 50 minutes talking about the character customizer. So I decided to make it more of an overarching first look preview video. And here we are. So let's take a first look at starting a game. Where to begin? This is a very interesting blend of RPG strategy, inspired by classics, Fallen Enchantress if you're familiar. There's also quite a strong kind of civ building, Civilization Age of Wonders-esque, Songs of Silence. I mean, I could keep dropping names of games here, and it wouldn't quite accurately describe this experience. So let me just break it down. For starters, I begin with a hero, a champion, if you will, and this character, JumboPixel, the pink bald guy, will do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of exploration and finding goodies on the map. Then we have the civ building thing. So here's the research tree, currently divided into 3 different categories: civilization, warfare, and magic. So much to research, I've barely scratched the surface there. Then we have the actual world itself. I have my first city that I've settled using my own character, my starting champion, my starting unit, and I'm going to explore this world. The world is filled with both sort of RPG-style quests that may lead me around the map looking for certain things, as well as what I would describe as goody huts, these green chests. For example, here's an ancient battlefield. I've walked across it, I've found some nice armor, and I've decided to equip it straight away because I started with none. Back over to the city building side of things, and here you can see the core sort of fundamental city building structure. I start with a core city, and around that there are these hard to see and hard to discern green squares. I can place my buildings in them and then build out from there. Cities are of course used to produce things like food, mana for magic, fame and radiance, and they also produce other things like money, production, and unrest, a kind of a negative multiplier across everything else. As I level up my settlements, I can also choose to specialize them, choosing to become fortresses or towns. Speaking of towns, there's also the option to settle outposts, so I don't just need to go straight into cities like this. I could choose to place outposts to kind of gather extra resources or material around the outskirts too. You'll notice that the time it takes to build these things is measured in seasons, and you'll also notice up the top right-hand corner of the screen by the faction power menu there that it's currently season 22. The seasons are therefore turns, and for many of the turns, my cities, I find, don't really do a lot. There's a bit of kind of end turn, move through, wait for the next production. That, granted, could be a me problem. Maybe I'm just really slow at building things. I don't know yet. It's early days. Thankfully, there's a lot of exploration to do in this world. Here you can see I'm engaging in a fight, building up a little bit of an army here for pink-balled JumboPixel, and thankfully that army is strong enough to achieve a victory. As you move through your fights, you'll be rewarded by things like money or gear, and you'll start to progress your characters. And this, alongside the story elements that are playing out around the outside, is fundamental, I believe, to the RPG side of things. The first time you rank up, you get this selection. You choose a path. Currently 5 different paths, from sort of very aggressive ones to defensive ones. The commander in the middle is more really about city building, and then you can lean into the magical side of things. I haven't really been able to experience a lot of the city building booster side of my champions because I'm far too busy wandering around exploring the world to do that. And maybe that could be another reason why the production in my cities is a little lackluster at times. What is less lackluster, in fact at all times, is how you can kind of build your army in the early game and actually just get out there and find a whole lot of good stuff, including cities to capture. So let's take a slightly closer look at combat then. Units are trained within my cities, within my settlements, and then they're added to armies who are sent out across the map. The story can also help, by the way, to throw you a whole load of extra free units, or even right the way up to champions. Here, for example, I'm in a 1v1 duel. Let's quickly touch on combat then, shall we? It can be fought manually in this sort of square-based map within a map, or you can let it auto-resolve. The animations here, by the way, were on 1 speed, but they played out far too quickly. One small piece of criticism I'd deliver here is it would be nice if those were slowed right down. I'd really love to be able to see and savor what's going on, particularly as I build up more gear and spells and all that kind of stuff for my units. On the other hand, sometimes you just want to move through a fight. There's an auto-resolve option, or you can speed the animations right up. Once you finish your fight, you may grab a little bit of extra gear, so don't forget to chuck that onto Bacco the Bigger, as it were. Where I'm going with this overarching point is that the exploration, fighting, getting goods, getting equipment, and ranking up and progressing your characters is, in my early view here, what will really drive a lot of the early game. City building? Yeah, sure. I return to it every 10 or 20 seasons and queue up another couple of buildings or units. But it's this stuff that I've found, so far anyway, to be the most enjoyable. The fights? Absolutely. Chuck in. Here I learned, for example, it takes a long time to cast my spell. A little late there, Jumbo. But also that when my units are next to each other, they'll fight together and absolutely crush the enemy wolf party, coming away with a couple of wolf pelts and other crafting goods for good measure. Perhaps more importantly though, I've gained experience and now I can level up. I can level up through the general trait tree, or through the mage tree, because I selected that this character, me, would be a mage. The benefits here seem very significant, and that might be underselling it. There's also quite a profound trade-off as well. You're not going to be able to get all of them, unless you're playing a campaign that stretches across tens of hundreds of hours, so you're going to have to choose one or the other. The good news is, the game seems to be fairly generous, fairly friendly in giving me more core characters, more heroes, champions, is what they're actually called. This is what the screen looks like when you unlock another one. Exactly how or why I'm doing it is slightly unclear to me, except that there is a yield called fame, and the generation of fame seems to attract additional characters. Other ways to attract them, other metrics to sort of judge how I can get them or when I can get them, continue to escape me. And it's probably important to reinforce here that this is very much an early access game. I mean, look at this guy in the diplomacy screen. He's T-posing with no hands, right? Very much an early access release. In fact, it has only just released in early access. That being said, there's a lot here. The diplomacy screen, the UI, too straightforward, too simple, and too small as well, right? Look at it down the bottom left corner there. Yet, it already exists, it's already there, and it kind of does everything that I need it to do right now. I'd like to see more there, don't get me wrong, but it does the job. There are treaties, there are agreements, and there are war declarations. Like any good early access release, and I fully expect this to be one, there are two key elements. Firstly, I'd love to know where it's headed, so they've already released loads of developer diaries. Keep that kind of thing coming. Secondly, maybe slightly more importantly to you, we also need to understand whether it provides good bang for its buck, and where it sits more broadly. So let's quickly touch on that first. Where do you place Elemental Reforged? As I mentioned in the introduction, there are elements of, pun intended, a lot of different games here. At a really broad level, kind of RPG, fantasy, strategy game, I feel a little bit of Age of Wonders 4 here as I build out my city and train my units. But obviously that's not actually going to be a very good, accurate, all-encompassing comparison. There are other elements here, like HOM, right? The Magic series. Obviously, Fallen Enchantress is the sort of spiritual predecessor here. And, for the rest, actually, I might just defer to you. When you see me play this game, or indeed play it for yourself, what do you feel? How does it relate to the games that you've been playing recently, or maybe games that you've been playing a long time ago? For there is also a very classic feel here too. The graphics somewhat lean into this kind of classic retro feel, though equally the map is vibrant and colourful, and the extension of all sorts of different camera angles and ways for me to explore the world feel very modern. The UI also, like this victory screen here and some other elements, really lean into a more glossy, more modern feel. Some of the elements of it, though, do need some updating. The build and train buttons here when I'm building things can be very easily misinterpreted. Sometimes particularly when I was first playing, felt like I'd queued something to build, but I hadn't. Or I'd accidentally queued a few extra things. I think the buttons need to go away, the UI needs to make it really clear where and when you've built something and the fact that it's done. But then I started leaning into extra elements, like, oh, hey, there's a shop here. And I can buy and sell things for money. It's not just my city production or my tax rate controlled in the top left-hand corner of the screen. I can actually go out, get goods and sell them, and then use that money to rush the production of buildings or units within my cities. And here it started to piece itself together. And finally, I started to feel a little bit more at home in Elemental Reforged. My early, particularly strong party full of champions also managed to take this city, and maybe one or two more, from my now enemy, which also taught me a lot about city building and the richness of the resources around a city. There's a lot more at play here than might initially meet the eye. So as we move toward the end of the video, let me wrap up my very early thoughts for this early access game. It feels to me like a truly unique blend of strategy and RPG. Particularly the RPG front. If you're looking for a strategy game that is also an RPG game, then this is going to be something that likely really interests you. I have, at the moment, barely scratched the surface of everything that it has to offer. And I'm kind of hooked. So, I'm going to leave this video there and maybe go and play just a little bit more. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.